You think the law is on your side in my courtroom? I am the law. Judge Harding sneered, his arrogant smirk unmistakable. For years, he had ruled with unchecked power, silencing anyone who dared challenge him. He thought today would be no different, just another case to crush under the weight of his gavel. But what he didn't know was that these two black sisters standing before him had fought battles far more grueling than anything this courtroom could throw at them. And this time, it was he who was about to lose everything. Stick with me until the end, because justice is about to hit hard. If you love stories where the tables turn, hit that subscribe button now. The old courthouse in Maplewood, Pennsylvania, may not have looked like much from the outside. Its weathered brick exterior and Greek revival columns hinted at an authority that had long faded. Inside, however, tension was palpable. The hallways buzzed with murmurs from tenants disputing evictions, families locked in custody battles, and attorneys flipping through thick stacks of legal papers. Outside Courtroom B, two young women stood by a bench in the hallway, their shoulders straight, eyes calm, but their faces set with unmistakable tension. Adeline and Amira Thompson were identical twins, tall, with hair meticulously braided into coils pinned neatly into buns at the nape of their necks. Both wore dark, conservative suits. At first glance, they appeared to be just another pair of well-prepared litigants. But anyone who took a moment to look deeper into their eyes would notice something steal behind them: discipline, self-possession, and an unspoken resolve. Down the hallway, passers-by whispered, and the sisters became the talk of Maplewood that day, though they had never sought the attention. The chatter revolved around the audacity of two black sisters daring to challenge Judge Herbert E. Harding, a man infamous for his condescending remarks, old-school prejudices, and a relentless arrogance about his own power. For years, no one in Maplewood had successfully confronted Harding's open displays of bigotry. Those who dared to challenge him either left the courtroom humiliated or faced an unexpected legal penalty. Adeline fidgeted with the corner of a manila folder containing crucial documents about their late grandmother's estate. She and Amira were embroiled in a contentious legal battle over property lines. What should have been a routine hearing, meant to secure the farmland their grandmother had purchased decades ago, had spiraled out of control. The conversation, initially about zoning regulations, quickly became a moral battlefield, culminating in their appearance before the notoriously racist judge. Amira exhaled slowly. "You ready?" Her voice was tinged with subdued nerves. Adeline pursed her lips. "We've been through worse. All we can do is present our case." As she spoke those words, memories flooded her mind. The endless obstacles they had faced just trying to become the rightful owners of their grandmother's land. The suspicious glares from neighbors who doubted they had the means or the knowledge to care for property. The pointed remarks from attorneys questioning their documentation. But through it all, Adeline and Amira had remained steadfast, especially when they had faced adversity far beyond a courtroom, on the scorching sands of another continent, during their time in the U.S. Army. Yes, they had been through worse. Indeed, when the twins entered Courtroom B, they took in their surroundings. A wooden-paneled wall stood behind the judge's bench, but their focus remained unwavering. The courtroom was eerily silent, save for the faint squeak of Judge Herbert E. Harding's leather chair as he settled behind a tall, imposing bench. The American flag hung stiffly at an angle near his seat, and a stern bailiff commanded the gallery to rise. Judge Harding, a tall and gaunt man, had silver hair combed meticulously back, not a strand out of place. His eyes narrowed as he sized up the two sisters standing before him, a condescending sneer twisting his lips. It was clear in his gaze. How dare these two come into my courtroom? The tension in the room was palpable as everyone else stood, awaiting his cue. The bailiff recited the typical courtroom opening, ending with the obligatory, "Please be seated." From the moment the proceedings began, Harding's focus was locked on Adeline's composed, upright posture. His gaze lingered on her, his eyes filled with disdain. Before he spoke, his voice sharp. "Miss Thompson, is it?" Adeline nodded politely, her demeanor calm. "Yes, Your Honor." Adeline Thompson, representing myself and my sister, Miss Amira Thompson. Harding's lips twisted into a mocking half-smile. "Rather unusual, representing yourselves." "No attorney." Amira cleared her throat, her voice steady. We're well versed in the law for this matter, sir. We have everything we need. Well versed, Harding repeated, his drawl dripping with skepticism. I see. And you've come to dispute my earlier ruling that your property is in violation of Maplewood's zoning regulations. Adeline responded respectfully, her voice unwavering. Yes, Your Honor. We like the record to show that the property lines have been recognized as farmland for over 50 years. We have the original documentation from 1971, and this hearing should confirm that the farmland remains in our name, without additional zoning restrictions. With every word Adeline spoke, Harding's expression seemed to darken. After a theatrical sigh, he leaned forward, his voice laced with mockery. Let me guess, he said, raising an eyebrow. This farmland has what special meaning for you? You're telling me you deserve an exception? There is no exception, Amira replied calmly. We're simply reaffirming what's already been established. Harding chuckled mirthlessly. Simply reaffirming, he repeated, as though savoring the absurdity of the words. His eyes scanned the gallery, noting the smattering of onlookers who had gathered out of curiosity. He returned his gaze to the twins, his eyes narrowing. I find it intriguing that you think you can reinterpret the law to suit your convenience. Adeline bristled at his insinuation. We're not reinterpreting anything, she shot back. We're citing the documents our grandmother left us, along with Maplewood's farmland preservation statutes. They protect farmland from certain zoning regulations if the land has been used for farming for more than 20 consecutive years. Harding's gaze narrowed, and he leaned back, studying Adeline with an unsettling intensity. You sure talk a good game, Miss Thompson, he said slowly. But I see something in your eyes. Rebellion, perhaps? A difficulty with authority. He paused, a smirk forming on his face as he gestured between the sisters. Now, I'm curious. What exactly do you do for a living, Miss Thompson? And you, Miss Thompson? Amira swallowed carefully, her voice calm but resolute. We currently run a small business. Our grandmother left us farmland that we want to restore. That's the reason we're here, to confirm our right to continue the farm's operations without external intrusion. Harding's question dripped with condescension. A small business? You wouldn't be out of your depth, would you? Adeline and Amira exchanged a quiet glance, silently deciding not to reveal the full extent of their backgrounds just yet. The judge didn't need to know about their time in the U.S. Army or the fact that they had recently returned to Maplewood after serving overseas in conflict zones. They wanted this hearing to be focused solely on the merits of the farmland documents. But Harding, keenly observant, sensed something deeper in their calm demeanor, a quiet confidence that unsettled him, perhaps even threatened him. A faint flush crept up his neck as he flipped open a file with deliberate slowness. We'll continue, he said abruptly, his voice tightening with barely masked irritation. But I warn you both, these so-called farmland preservation statutes might not apply if you can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the land. Amira lifted the manila envelope with a firm grip. We have the evidence here, Your Honor, she said, her voice calm but unwavering. Signed statement from the prior caretaker. Receipts for seed distribution. Judge Harding waved his hand dismissively, cutting her off. We'll get to that, he muttered. First, I'll hear from the Maplewood Zoning Committee's representative. He gestured to Mr. Howell, a tall, stocky man in a navy suit, who shuffled forward. Yes, Your Honor, he said, his voice respectful but uncertain. Harding leaned forward, his gaze sharp as he commanded, Let's get down to the alleged violations. Mr. Howell cleared his throat. I see you're citing that Miss Thompson and Miss Thompson have not complied with certain fencing regulations and have refused to pay additional property taxes on the reclassification of the land. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Howell confirmed. Adeline felt her stomach knot as she listened to the charges. She knew this was all trumped-up nonsense. The farmland had been recognized for decades, and Maplewood's farmland codes had never required them to pay taxes at the level of commercial or residential property. But the zoning committee had abruptly tried to reclassify the land, likely to push them off it, an attempt driven by the potential for development deals. Harding's voice broke through her thoughts. Yes, well, he began, tapping his pen on the desk with deliberate slowness. "I'm quite certain these two young women have no real legal background. Perhaps they've stumbled onto farmland that they can't manage. Let's hear the facts." He smirked. "So, what if their grandmother owned it? It means nothing if the official reclassification has already been decided. We have rules for a reason." Adeline clenched her fist beneath the table, but maintained her neutral expression. Another surge of memories rushed at her. The steady, calm demeanor she had learned in her army training. She had kept her cool even when a commander once doubted her abilities based on her size and gender. Now, she took a deep, slow breath, preparing herself for the fight ahead. Throughout that morning session, Adeline and Amira remained calm and measured, presenting their evidence with precision. They showcased documents from Maplewood's own records, showing farmland designations that had dated back decades. They brought forward statements from neighbors attesting to the land's continuous use. They even had an affidavit from their grandmother's best friend, who had watched them work the land every summer, planting and harvesting since they were children. But each time they spoke, Judge Harding's eyebrows would rise with disdain, his expression filled with what could only be described as contempt. He peppered them with questions that were neither relevant nor respectful. "Why do you assume you can handle farmland as well as trained professionals?" he sneered. "Do you think Maplewood's rules should bend for you? Is it possible that you're simply not from around here and don't understand how we do things?" Amira, usually the more composed of the two, felt her calmness begin to crack. Harding's word hung in the air, and she responded with surprising steadiness. "Our grandmother lived here most of her life. We were raised here as well, until we left for college. We have every right." Harding chuckled darkly, almost mockingly. Yes, we all have so-called rights," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "But Maplewood is a very particular place, Miss Thompson. We have expectations about how farmland is handled and who handles it. Tradition matters." A pause followed, heavy and deliberate. "Some folks see that farmland, see new faces, and wonder if they'll keep it up to standard." New faces. The word seemed to echo throughout the courtroom, and Adeline could sense the subtle gasps from the onlookers. Many of them understood exactly what Harding was implying. To them, it was as clear as day. He might as well have said, "We don't want black owners of farmland in Maplewood." Her heart pounded in her chest. She exchanged a quick glance with Amira, who gave a barely noticeable nod, signaling that they would handle this. The air in the room thickened with tension, but they were ready. Sensing the mounting discomfort, the bailiff cleared his throat, but Harding waved him off dismissively. "Let's keep going, Miss Thompson," he said, try to regain control of the proceedings. "You said you had documents." Adeline moved to present the affidavit, but before she could, Harding flicked his hand imperiously. "That's enough for now," he said, cutting her off. "We'll break for lunch. This hearing will resume promptly at 1:30. The twins barely had a moment to absorb the tension in the room before they were ushered out. The fight, however, was far from over. Judge Harding stood, and the bailiff commanded everyone to rise. In an instant, the judge whisked himself behind the door to his chambers, leaving the courtroom in a tense silence. As Adeline and Amira stepped out into the midday sun, the weight of the day seemed to press down on them. The air felt heavy, as though the very atmosphere of Maplewood was charged with anticipation. The downtown area of Maplewood was quaint, with small storefronts lining the streets, a family-run diner, a used bookstore, and a hardware shop clustered together around the courthouse. Everywhere they looked, the sisters sensed eyes on them. Maplewood wasn't a large community, and word spread quickly. The tension surrounding Judge Harding's courtroom had become the town's worst-kept secret. Rather than letting the stares bother them, the twins focused on what needed to be done. "We'll talk to Mr. Howell from the zoning committee," Adeline said, shading her eyes from the glaring sun. "Maybe we can come to some agreement that the judge can't simply dismiss." Amira nodded, though her expression was skeptical. She hardly believed Harding would see reason. "He's determined to bury us," she thought, but then her next words came out in a quiet whisper. "But he doesn't know us." They continued their walk to a small cafe a few blocks away, passing Maplewood's Veterans Memorial Park on the way. The park was a small plot of land where flags fluttered gently in the breeze, and a lone statue stood tall, commemorating the local soldiers who had served in various conflicts. Wreaths and small flags lay at the base of the statue, left behind by visitors paying their respects. For a brief moment, Adeline and Amira paused. Amira inhaled deeply, tried to push away the flood of memories. "I can't believe how people in this town think they know us," she murmured, blinking back the emotions of her army days. "They don't realize we've sacrificed for this country. We've served. We've put our lives on the line." She shook her head, the sting of Harding's treatment fresh in her mind. Yet he had the audacity to treat us like ungrateful strangers. Adeline placed a gentle hand on the statue's plaque, her voice soft but firm. "Sometimes," she said, "people see what they want to see, but we know who we are." They stood in silence for a moment longer, heads bowed in quiet respect. Then, their resolve firm, and they continued down the sidewalk toward the cafe. Inside the rustic cafe, the tantalizing aroma of fresh coffee mixed with the soft hum of conversation, Adeline and Amira found a small table near the window. Their plan was simple: gather their thoughts, review their documents, and brace for the afternoon session. As they sat, the door swung open, letting in a brief flurry of sunlight. A group of local Maplewood officials entered, including Mr. Howell from the zoning committee. The stocky man spotted the sisters immediately, his face twisting into a faint grimace. With a coffee cup in hand, he walked over to their table. Miss Thompson," he greeted, his tone strained, as if he'd rather be anywhere else. "Do you mind if I have a quick word?" "Of course," Adeline said, gesturing to the spare chair. Howell sat down, his eyes scanning their papers. "I can see you're serious about this farmland," he said, eyes roving over their documents. "You two have actually done your homework." Amira's mouth tightened, and her voice took on a sharp edge. "We're not incompetent," she said, the testy tone creeping into her words. Howell raised a placating hand. "I didn't say that, but you have to understand Maplewood's perspective. The farmland's been idle, no major yields. The committee saw an opening to reclassify it, potentially bringing developers for new housing. Maplewood needs expansion, you see, new tax revenue." Adeline stiffened. "I see. So, you found farmland owned by an elderly woman and thought no one would notice if you took it away. But now that we're stepping in, you're doubling down." Howell nodded slowly, as though verifying that she had read the situation correctly. "I can't speak for the entire committee, but yeah, that's basically it. I suspect Judge Harding has, let's say, other motivations in making sure you lose this case. But to be honest, Maplewood would benefit financially from reclassification." He paused before speaking again, his voice lowering. "If it helps you at all, the judge's words earlier, they were out of line." "That's an understatement," Amira said sharply, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "Just watch your backs." Howell's expression grew more serious as he lowered his voice. "Harding hates being challenged, especially by people he perceives as outsiders." Neither twin missed the loaded meaning behind the words "people he perceives as outsiders." The implication was clear, and Adeline felt a flash of anger rise within her. They weren't just fighting for their land. They were fighting for their place in a community that didn't want them there. As Howell finished his coffee and stood to leave, he glanced over his shoulder at the sisters. "Just be careful," he said, before walking out with the others. Adeline and Amira exchanged a look, both of them silently acknowledging the gravity of the situation. It was clear that this battle was far from over, and it was one they weren't going to back down from. Howell's admission, though small, was appreciated by the sisters. Maybe not everything was lost. After all, after a moment of contemplation, Howell stood. "Anyway, I'll see you in there." "Good luck," he said, offering no more words before walking away. Adeline tapped her pen against the edge of her notebook, her mind turning over the conversation. "So, it's about money and bigotry," she said, shaking her head. "No surprise." She sighed and continued. "Let's stick to our strategy. We have everything we need to prove it's farmland. If Harding tries to forcibly reclassify it, it's a violation of the state Farmland Preservation Acts." The sisters sipped their drinks in silence, the determination between them settling into an unspoken understanding. Outside, The sun climbed higher, and the calm of the cafe was punctuated by the clinking of cups and low murmurs from other patrons. They both knew the real battle was just beginning as the afternoon session approached. Adeline and Amira entered courtroom B, and they immediately noticed a difference. The gallery was fuller. Word had spread through Maplewood that the twin sisters were standing up to Judge Harding. Whispers circulated about an out-of-town blogger who might cover the case. Even some townspeople, who had once suffered under Harding's scorn, now showed up, eager to see if anyone could finally topple the self-styled tyrant. The bailiff's commanding voice broke the stillness. All rise. The room snapped to attention as Harding strode in, his black robe billowing behind him. He settled into his chair with the same smugness as before, flipping casually through a few papers on his desk. "We'll resume," he announced, his voice cold. Miss Thompson, do you have further evidence to present?" Adeline stood tall, chin high. "Yes, Your Honor," she said firmly, walking toward the bench. She carefully handed over the original farmland deed and affidavits from their neighbors. Harding glanced at the papers with disinterest, setting them aside after a cursory look. "I see," he muttered, as though uninterested. "Long-time farmland, blah, blah. Are you actually practicing agriculture there? Because, as far as I can tell, you've been gone for years, doing who knows what." Amira rose to her feet, her voice steady. "We were serving, Your Honor. We were in the United States Army." A hush fell across the gallery. Harding's expression froze for a moment, possibly taken aback. But then his lips curled into a mocking sneer. "So you say, and this is relevant, how?" Amira's calm exterior wavered for a split second, but she quickly recovered. "It's relevant because you're implying we abandoned the property. We didn't. Our grandmother leased it to a local caretaker while we served our country overseas. We both served multiple tours, and we're proud of that, sir." Harding's eyes gleamed, but it wasn't respect that shone in them. If anything, the look was drenched in disdain. "Well, I'm sure your grandmother was proud. But the question remains, was the farmland truly being used as farmland, or was it left fallow? The caretaker's name is not on this affidavit." Adeline reached for another file. "We have evidence from the caretaker, Your Honor. The land was used for limited seasonal crops. The caretaker's father took ill, so the farmland wasn't as productive as it once was. But it was still classified as farmland." Harding exhaled theatrically, the sound reverberating through the silent courtroom. Then, turning his cold gaze on the twins, he sneered. "You know, I don't appreciate people waltzing in here claiming they serve our country, expecting a free pass. A uniform doesn't guarantee you special privileges, Miss Thompson, especially not in my courtroom." A faint gasp rippled through the gallery. Adeline's throat tightened, but she steadied herself, remembering the strict discipline instilled in her during Army training. Maintain composure. Breathe. She'd faced far more dangerous threats than this judge. It was Amira who spoke next, her voice unwavering. "We're not asking for special treatment, Your Honor. We just want fairness under the law." Harding looked almost eager to respond. "Fairness, is it? Let's see if you can handle what real fairness means." He picked up a set of documents, slowly flipping through them. "I'll read the Maplewood Zoning Committee's resolution, and then we'll see if you still think you have a case." The judge took his time, reading through the documents as the gallery remained silent, waiting. The reclassification of their farmland would proceed unless Adeline and Amira could prove within 30 days that they complied with every single farmland code, including some that were newly revised. These codes had never been applied so rigorously to any other farmland, but Judge Harding insisted that the sisters meet the updated requirements without any extensions. If they failed, they would lose their farmland status, triggering higher property taxes or risking the land being seized. "If you can pay, the caretaker's signature alone won't cut it," Harding concluded, his voice harsh. "We need inspectors, soil samples, and multiple statements from recognized farmers within Maplewood. The caretaker's father or anyone else isn't recognized by the Maplewood Agricultural Board." Adeline stepped forward, a flash of frustration in her eyes. "Your Honor, this is unprecedented. I've never heard of farmland owners being required to produce so many additional documents under the farmland preservation laws at the state level. Harding cut her off, his tone chilling. Perhaps you didn't hear me. These are Maplewood's rules. This is Maplewood's jurisdiction. If you don't like it, you're free to try your luck in appellate court. But good luck with that. They rarely overturn local zoning decisions. He scanned the gallery, his lips twisting into a malicious grin, before refocusing on the sisters. Need I remind you that I am the law here? That was the moment it shifted for Adeline and Amira. Until now, they had tried to keep their personal history under wraps, focusing only on the farmland. But they now recognized that Harding would continue to move the goalposts, inventing new rules to push them out. He was weaponizing his authority to degrade them in front of the entire community. Amira inhaled deeply, her voice calm but unwavering. Your Honor, if I may, we did not come here to ask for special treatment, but I won't stand here and let you twist the law to suit your personal biases. We swore an oath to defend this country. Harding's laugh interrupted her words, dripping with derision. Don't speak to me of oaths. I've been administering justice longer than you've been alive. A ripple of unease spread through the gallery as Harding's harsh words hung in the air. For a brief moment, Adeline's mind wandered back to the day she signed her enlistment papers. She remembered the pride she felt, knowing that she and her sister were stepping into a life of service. Now, confronted by this contemptuous judge, she felt something deep rise within her. Straightening her shoulders, Adeline looked directly at Harding. Yes, Your Honor, you've had a long tenure, but that doesn't make your actions just. We're not leaving Maplewood, and we're not giving up our farmland. The law's on our side. Harding's nostrils flared as he glared at the sisters. I've had about enough of your insolence. Then, the line that would be etched into Maplewood's local lore was spoken. Harding sneered, his words dripping with malice. You too can strut around here with your so-called army background, but I see you for what you really are. Don't think your color and your uniform will intimidate me. A stunned silence gripped the courtroom. The bailiff visibly tensed, uncertain of how to respond. The gallery collectively held its breath. That moment felt as though it stretched into an eternity, an unfiltered, blatant display of racism from the bench, one that even the most jaded in the room had never heard so openly. Most people might have broken down or reacted with fury, but Adeline and Amira were steeled by experiences few in Maplewood could imagine. They had navigated war zones, defused bombs, and endured the constant threat of sniper fire. They had dragged wounded comrades to safety under blistering sun, negotiated with local interpreters in villages, and studied advanced combat training at Fort Benning. This moment in a small Pennsylvania courthouse paled in comparison. Amira's voice trembled, not with fear, but with carefully contained anger. Your Honor, you are out of line. Harding leaned forward, a sneer etched on his face. Careful, Miss Thompson. Adeline stepped in, her voice calm but firm. No, you be careful, sir, because once this is over, you'll answer for your actions. We'll make sure people know what's happening in Maplewood's courthouse, Adeline said firmly, turning slightly to let her gaze sweep the gallery. All of these people will be witnesses to your bigotry. Judge Harding's hand slammed down on his desk with a resounding bam. That's enough, he barked. Clear the courtroom, except for the parties involved. This hearing is going into closed session. A flurry of startled movement erupted as the bailiff ordered spectators to leave. The sisters watched as the public was forced out. Among them, a local blogger tried to protest, shouting, "Wait! We have a right to." But the bailiff insisted he leave, and the door slammed shut, sealing them in with Harding, the court reporter, and the zoning committee counsel. Harding looked triumphant. Now, we proceed on my terms. Miss Thompson, he said, turning to the sisters with a sneer. I suggest you think carefully before flinging accusations at me. A judge can hold you in contempt. Adeline said nothing, though her glare spoke volumes. Harding continued, Here's how this will go. You will produce the required inspections, signatures, and any other nonsense I request within 30 days. Otherwise, the farmland reclassification stands. Adeline's jaw tightened, but she remained silent. Amira crossed her arms, her voice unwavering. "This is entirely outside the scope of contempt." Harding's tone softened, but his voice was dripping with condescension as he tapped his gavel. "Shall I continue?" he asked, his question rhetorical, a quiet challenge hanging in the air. The room fell silent. Finally, Adeline nodded, her voice strained. "We understand," she bit out, her eyes flashing. "But do not think we'll stand idly by." Harding dismissed the sisters with a wave of his hand. "The hearing is adjourned. You have your instructions." He turned to the court reporter. "End the record now." With that, the hearing was over, leaving the sisters reeling. Disgust, anger, and a deep sense of betrayal coursed through them as they exited. Harding's cold, self-satisfied stare followed them from behind his desk. Outside the courtroom, a small crowd of people who'd been kicked out gathered. Some were outraged, others curious. A few approached the sisters, offering sympathetic words. "That was insane," said a middle-aged woman with curly hair. "He actually said those horrible things. I thought he'd be more subtle." A man in a baseball cap nodded. "Judge Harding's always been a piece of work, but this time he went too far." He cast a worried glance at them. "Watch out. He'll come after you. He's done it before, made people regret challenging him." Adeline exhaled slowly, searching for the right words. "We're not afraid of him," she said simply, her voice steady. Amira, on the other hand, was already dialing a number on her phone. "We're contacting a lawyer," she explained, more to Adeline than to the crowd. "We gave Harding a chance to do the right thing, but he's made his stance clear." The crowd parted, letting them pass as they walked away. More voices followed them, murmuring with growing support. "He can't get away with that," one person said. "Maybe the state's judicial board will do something." Despite the murmurs, Adeline and Amira knew the battle was far from over. In Maplewood's entire history, few had ever taken serious steps to hold Harding accountable. He had a fortress of connections, a well-maintained circle of powerful allies who either agreed with him or turned a blind eye to his transgressions. But now, the twins had a reason to fight, and they weren't going to back down. The sisters headed immediately to the small law office of Attorney Olivia Monroe, located in a modest brick building near the center of Maplewood. Adeline had come across Monroe's name during her initial research on farmland laws. Monroe had earned a reputation for being tough, ethical, and not easily cowed by local politics. Inside, the office smelled of polished wood and old books. Miss Monroe, a petite black woman with sharp eyes and a brisk demeanor, ushered them in. "I heard about what happened," she said, motioning for them to sit. "I'm so sorry you had to endure that. Harding's bigotry is the worst-kept secret in Maplewood, but no one's been able to dethrone him, so to speak." Amira nodded wearily. "We need help." Monroe clasped her hands together. "First, let's address your farmland classification case. You're in the right, legally speaking. Harding is applying arbitrary standards, possibly ignoring certain state preservation laws. However, challenging him head-on will be difficult. There's a reason no one has succeeded yet." Adeline and Amira exchanged glances, their resolve firming as they realized they weren't alone in this fight. "We have experience," Adeline said carefully, her tone measured. "We can handle difficulty. We just need to know the steps." Monroe nodded and continued. "We can file an appeal with the State Farmland Commission, but that will take time. Meanwhile, you're up against that 30-day countdown." She paused before continuing. "You'll be forced to scramble to meet Harding's impossible demands. You'll need to gather every form of proof, soil tests, statements from recognized farmers in Maplewood. Anything that can bury them under so much documentation that they can't simply wave you off." Amira's posture stiffened with resolve. "We'll do it. Every last test, every signature, if that's what it takes." Monroe tilted her head slightly, considering. "Then there's the matter of the judge's racist remarks. That's a separate path. Proving judicial misconduct usually requires a formal complaint with the Judicial Conduct Board. It's a drawn-out process. If Harding's found in violation, he could be reprimanded or removed, but those boards move slowly. You'd still be under that 30-day pressure." Adeline spoke quietly but with simmering conviction. "How do we ensure he gets the punishment he deserves?" Monroe offered a sad smile. Harding is deeply entrenched here, with many allies, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. If you're serious, we'll gather statements from witnesses, transcripts, if the court reporter is willing to supply them, and press coverage. It takes a wave of public outrage to move these things along. A flicker of determination lit Amira's eyes. We can bring that wave. Adeline nodded. He humiliated us, sure, but that's not even the main point. We can't stand by and let him keep doing this to others. Monroe leaned back in her chair, impressed. I like your spirit. I'll represent you on the farmland matter. As for the judicial complaint, we'll need to coordinate. Are you certain you're ready for the retaliation? Adeline's lips pressed into a thin line, but her resolve was clear. We've seen worse. We'll be fine. A faint curiosity sparked in Monroe's eyes. You mentioned you serve in the Army. That's amazing. Thank you for your service. Amira nodded politely. We're proud to serve, and we're used to deal with threats that have real teeth. Harding is just a bully behind a bench. Monroe exhaled softly. Then we'll fight him step by step. The sisters spent the next several hours mapping out legal strategies, drafting documents, and listing possible allies. They reached out to any Maplewood farmer who might sign a statement verifying that the farmland had been consistently in use. They also compiled a list of anyone who might have heard Harding's racist remarks over the years. It was a mountain of tasks, but the sisters felt a renewed energy. They had a plan. As they left Monroe's office, the first hints of dusk settled over Maplewood's quiet streets. Street lamps flickered to life, and the distant hum of crickets accompanied their walk home. Though drained, they exchanged a confident nod. They had taken the first step in what they knew would be a long, challenging road. 2 weeks passed, and the fight was in full swing. By day, Adeline and Amira traveled across Maplewood collecting documents, scheduling soil inspections, and meeting with local farmers to gather witness statements. By night, they pored over legal texts, cross-checking farmland statutes with Monroe's guidance. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. People were learning about the twins' backgrounds. Word spread that these young black women had served overseas, been stationed at Fort Benning for specialized training, and possessed a repertoire of skills Maplewood had never quite encountered before. A few eyebrows were raised. Some townspeople who had previously dismissed the sisters as mere troublemakers began to change their tune upon learning they were veterans. But there were also those who resented them even more for it, fueling gossip that the sisters thought themselves above everyone else. Judge Harding, in a quiet rage, began to press harder. The clerk's office suddenly lost their request forms, forcing the sisters to resubmit. The local agricultural board gave them contradictory instructions at one point, and a soil sample request was misplaced. The inspector canceled their appointment the night before, leaving the sisters scrambling to find a replacement. It was clear that Harding's network was mobilizing to make their compliance nearly impossible within the 30-day window. Still, the sisters remained unflinchingly polite, yet determined. They would knock on the caretaker's door at dawn, verifying receipts and farm logs. They would drive across county lines to find a state-certified soil inspector who wouldn't be intimidated by Maplewood's local cronyism. They worked from sunrise to midnight, leaning on each other's unwavering presence. The strain was immense, but their Army training kicked in, discipline, resourcefulness, and a refusal to surrender under pressure. One afternoon, Adeline was kneeling by a fence on the farmland, methodically checking for damage and taking photographs as part of the documentation. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Expecting another inspector or a local ally, she answered the call. Instead, a snarling male voice spat out, "Drop your complaint. Leave Maplewood or you'll regret it." She froze. "Who is this?" she demanded. The caller hung up. A chill ran through her. Steadying herself, she scanned the horizon of the farmland. Gentle rolling hills, a few scattered trees. Nothing threatening in sight. But the threat was real enough. She immediately called Amira. Her sister arrived within minutes. Eyes narrowed. "What do you want to do?" Amira asked. Adeline shrugged, refusing to let fear rule her. "We've come too far. We don't back down." Amira nodded grimly. "We've been threatened by worse, and we overcame that." Indeed, during their Army service, They had dealt with mortar attacks, insurgent threats, and even infiltration attempts by local militias. The idea of small-town bullies trying to scare them off was almost comical in comparison, if not for the seriousness of what was at stake. They reported the incident to Olivia Monroe, who sighed heavily. Harding's network runs deep. I wouldn't put it past him to have associates who try intimidation tactics. Be careful. The sisters stepped up their vigilance. They maintained a watchful eye on the farmland, taking turns checking on each other. They even installed a motion-sensitive camera by the main gate. Meanwhile, the local blogger who had originally tried to stay in the courtroom posted about the hearing, though he hadn't heard all of Harding's racist remarks, having been removed before the worst of it. He relayed the clear tension and suggested that if there was more to the story, the sisters might speak up. At first, the sisters weren't sure they wanted to engage with the press, but Monroe advised them that public scrutiny might be their best defense. A judge like Harding thrives in silence, she warned. If you let the world watch, he can't hide as easily. Thus, the sisters agreed to sit down with a blogger who ran a small local news site called Maplewood Mirror. They recounted Harding's words, the closed session hearing, and his threats of contempt. They didn't mince words about the judge's racism. The story went online, and a ripple of shock coursed through Maplewood's residents, especially those who had always suspected Harding's prejudices but had never seen them so blatantly exposed. More readers commented, sharing their own experiences with Harding. Stories of prejudicial remarks, arbitrary rulings, and suspicious dismissals. A small wave began to form. Maplewood might finally be ready to hold Harding accountable. As the last week of their 30-day timeline approached, the farmland was teeming with new activity. Inspectors examined the soil, local agricultural officials verified the fence lines, and the caretaker even offered to run a small demonstration of planting new seeds. Yet with each passing day, the tension escalated. Harding continued to posture, refusing to sign any official extension. He scheduled a final hearing to review compliance at the end of the month. Rumors abounded, and Maplewood held its breath, wondering what would happen next. Adeline woke one morning with a knot in her stomach, staring out the window of the small farmhouse they were temporarily occupying. The memory of her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. The dream to keep this farmland in the family, how she had saved every penny to purchase it, determined to pass it down to future generations. Adeline recalled how Grandma would proudly recite the history of their land. How, when many black farmers were systematically driven off their property, Grandma stood firm. We have to protect it, Adeline thought, her resolve hardening. Amira joined her by the window, her voice steady. We won't lose it, Addie, she said, exhaling softly. And if Harding tries to play dirty, I'm ready to show him we don't scare easy. They shared a determined smile, a silent promise to each other that they would not back down. The day of the final compliance, hearing arrived. The sisters dressed in their suits once again, but this time they discreetly pinned the ribbons of their military service to their lapels. They would not boast about their army training, but they would not hide who they were either. Outside the courthouse, a small group of supporters had gathered. Former plaintiffs Harding had berated in the past, local community leaders, and even a few journalists from neighboring towns. As the sisters climbed the courthouse steps, they felt the hush of the crowd. People parted to let them pass, offering words of encouragement. Show him he can't do this. Stand strong. Thank you for your service. They nodded politely, their hearts pounding in their chests. Inside, they found the corridor leading to Courtroom B, the same corridor where they had first waited anxiously weeks ago. But this time, the tension was different. It was laced with a sense of imminent reckoning. They stepped into the courtroom with heads held high. Judge Harding entered, his expression cold and predatory. Gone was any facade of neutrality. He wasted no time. We're here to see if Miss Adeline Thompson and Miss Amira Thompson have met the burden of proof that their land remains farmland under Maplewood's definitions, he began, his voice dripping with disdain. Miss Thompson, do you have the documents requested? Adeline rose, her voice steady. Yes, Your Honor. We have soil inspection reports, verified statements from 4 recognized Maplewood farmers, and photographic evidence of crop rotation. Harding waved a dismissive hand. Let me see, he said. One by one, The sisters submitted the documents, each carefully labeled. Harding flipped through them with a sneer. Interesting, but not quite enough to convince me, he muttered. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Monroe stood up, speaking with authority. Your Honor, the farmland preservation laws are quite clear under Pennsylvania's definitions. These documents are more than sufficient. You have no legal grounds to reject them unless I say otherwise. Harding roared, losing the veneer of civility. I find these statements questionable. The caretaker has admitted the land went largely in use while these two ran off to the army. That alone is enough to break continuity. Adeline's jaw clenched. That caretaker never said any such thing, she responded, her voice firm. She turned to Mr. Howell, who was present to observe from the zoning committee. Would you care to clarify, Mr. Howell? Howell cleared his throat, his tone cautious. Your Honor, with respect, we have a caretaker's statement that the farmland was indeed used intermittently. Harding's gavel came down with a sharp crack. I don't need the zoning committee contradicting me in my own courtroom, he barked. Monroe took a step forward, her voice steady but resolute. Your Honor, I strongly object. This is highly improper. I don't care. Harding shouted, his voice booming. I have broad discretion here, and I say that the farmland reclassification stands. Their farmland privileges are hereby revoked, pending property tax reassessment. He glared at Adeline and Amira. You can't strong-arm me with your talk of service and color. This is Maplewood, not some army base. A shocked silence filled the room. The sisters felt the weight of Harding's words, but they didn't flinch. The fight was far from over. You think you can... That was when Amira lost her composure. She stepped forward, her voice trembling with righteous anger, and said, You have no idea how the army works. Her words echoing in the silent courtroom. We spent years protecting the rights of Americans, including yours, only to come home to a corrupt judge who spits on the law. We might have left Maplewood, but we never abandoned this land. You're the one who's out of line. Harding smirked, a look of contempt on his face. Bailiff, take Miss Thompson. Suddenly, a clear, authoritative voice rang out from the back of the courtroom. Stop. All heads whipped around. It was a woman in a conservative suit, flanked by two other officials. Judge Harding, I am Sharon Maas, a representative of the Pennsylvania Judicial Conduct Board. We have received multiple complaints regarding your conduct, including sworn affidavits from numerous parties about your racial bias and intimidation tactics. Harding's face turned an alarming shade of crimson. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. You have no right to barge into my courtroom without. She cut him off. We do have that right, Judge Harding. We are placing you under investigation for judicial misconduct, effective immediately. You are suspended from presiding over this case. A wave of stunned murmurs rolled through the courtroom as Harding's eyes bulged in disbelief. You can't do this. I'm the judge here. Miss Maas stepped forward. Bailiff, remove Judge Harding from the bench. Her command was calm but unyielding. We will not allow him to continue once the board has initiated formal proceedings. The bailiff, who had long been overshadowed by Harding, looked anxious but stepped forward. Harding tried to protest. I'll have your job, he shouted, but the bailiff, glancing at Miss Maas and her two associates, quietly guided him away from the bench. Adeline and Amira stood in shock, a sense of relief and vindication washing over them, though it was tinged with disbelief. They locked eyes, a silent acknowledgment passing between them. Justice had taken a crucial step in their favor. In the chaos that followed, Miss Maas conferred with the court clerk. A neighboring judge, Albert Reeves, was contacted to temporarily oversee the farmland case. Meanwhile, Harding was escorted out of the courtroom, still snarling threats and curses under his breath. Monroe approached the sisters, her eyes alight with surprise. I didn't realize the Judicial Conduct Board would act so quickly, she whispered. They must have received an overwhelming number of complaints, plus strong supporting evidence. The bloggers' articles, the statements from the gallery that day, all of it added up. Mr. Howell from the zoning committee shuffled over, looking equal parts relieved and concerned. Well, I guess that changes things, he said lamely. Adeline took a deep, steadying breath. Yes, it does. Later that day, Judge Albert Reeves, an older man with silver hair and gentle eyes, arrived with a hushed crowd that had not yet dispersed. After quickly reviewing the documents, he convened the hearing. All right, Judge Reeves said, scanning the farmland records. This seems straightforward. Miss Thompson, I see no reason to deny your farmland classification, particularly with these witness statements and the caretaker affidavits. I rule that the farmland remains farmland under Pennsylvania law. The reclassification attempt is hereby voided. A hush fell over the room before applause erupted from the gallery. Many cheered in relief, and Adeline and Amira felt tears prick at the corners of their eyes. Finally, their grandmother's land would stay safe, recognized as farmland. They had won, but the best was yet to come. Over the following weeks, Maplewood buzzed with rumors about the ongoing investigation into Judge Harding. The Judicial Conduct Board demanded transcripts of his recent cases. Court reporters turned over records of sessions in which Harding had made questionable remarks. Bit by bit, the facade he had used to terrorize Maplewood for years began to crumble. The bloggers' articles went viral in local circles, and more people came forward, sharing their stories of Harding's discriminatory rulings. With each new revelation, the grip that Judge Harding had held over the town weakened. The people of Maplewood began to see him for what he truly was, an abuser of power, and they were ready to hold him accountable. The sisters' fight was far from over, but for the first time, it seemed like they had a real chance of winning. The day of the final hearing on Judge Harding's misconduct arrived, and the town of Maplewood braced itself for what would be a defining moment. This hearing, held in Pittsburgh at a state judicial proceeding, would require Harding to answer charges of racial bias, abuse of judicial power, and intimidation. Adeline and Amira received summonses to testify, and though it meant reliving the humiliation they had endured, they knew it was necessary. The hearing was intense. Harding's lawyers tried to discredit the sisters, painting them as aggressive troublemakers. But Adeline and Amira remained calm, detailing Harding's exact words and supported by the sworn affidavit of others who had witnessed the judge's racism. The Judicial Conduct Board also introduced transcripts from a farmland hearing, which documented some of Harding's most telling remarks. The court reporter had not stopped recording when Harding abruptly ordered the session closed. In the end, evidence was damning. The board found Harding guilty of egregious misconduct. He was stripped of his judgeship and faced the possibility of criminal charges for certain abusive practices. For Maplewood, it was a seismic shift. The once untouchable judge had fallen, and his downfall marked the beginning of a new chapter for the town. In the wake of Harding's fall from grace, the local press unearthed more details about Adeline and Amira's Army service. It was revealed that both sisters had not only served on active duty, but had also undergone the prestigious U.S. Army Ranger School at Fort Benning, an extremely challenging course. Both had become among the relatively few female graduates in the program, skilled in advanced combat, reconnaissance, and leadership. When Maplewood learned the full extent of the sisters' training, the response was a mixture of awe and reflection. 2 local women had served at the highest levels of the Army, risking their lives for a country that still allowed judges like Harding to trample them. The sense of shame and gratitude collided within the community, prompting it to rally around the sisters even more. Amira brushed off the attention modestly. "We only did our duty, that's all," she said. But Adeline recognized the symbolic power in letting people see who they truly were. The best way to combat prejudice, she thought, is to let them see who we truly are. Back at the farmland, the sisters felt the tension that had lingered easing. With the official recognition of their land under the new paperwork, they decided to hold a small gathering to celebrate. They invited neighbors, supporters, and even members of the local press who had covered their battle. On the day of the gathering, they set up long folding tables and chairs under a large oak tree. Children played nearby, while the older folks enjoyed refreshments. Adeline and Amira stood at the center, greeting everyone with warmth and gratitude. Miss Monroe arrived, smiling broadly. "I hear Harding's not just out of job," she said. "He's in legal trouble for some financial improprieties connected to property deals. He might even face jail time." Adeline arched an eyebrow. Couldn't have happened to a more deserving man. Monroe's expression softened. It's not something to celebrate exactly, but maybe it'll teach him a lesson. Monroe's gaze swept across the farmland. Well, you had what you fought for, and Maplewood got rid of a corrupt judge. That's no small victory. Across the yard, a handful of local officials approached, including Mr. Howell. He looked more contrite than ever. Miss Thompson, he greeted, somewhat sheepishly. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for the trouble we caused. Sometimes we get caught up in the idea of development and forget that farmland and tradition matter too. Plus, well, Harding had a hold on a lot of us. Adeline inclined her head. Apology accepted, but let's do better going forward. Amira added, Indeed, if Maplewood wants to thrive, it can't let bullies run the show. Howell nodded, agreeing. The sisters smiled politely as he ambled away. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the field, the celebration continued. Soft breezes rustled through the tall grass as children chased each other, squealing with joy. The older guests shared stories at the tables. The farmland felt alive again, a testament to resilience, to hard work, and to the unbreakable spirit of those who refused to back down. Later, as most of the guests had departed and twilight draped the farmland in soft purple hues, the sisters wandered to a quiet spot near the old barn. This was the barn where they had once helped their grandmother store her tools, where they shared hushed conversations as teenagers about leaving Maplewood to find their place in the wider world. Now, they were back, forging a new chapter of their own. You know, Amira began leaning against the barn wall. It's surreal. We took on a crooked judge and won. I feel relief, pride, but also a sadness that it had to happen at all. Adeline nodded, her gaze lingering on the rolling fields. Grandma always said to never let fear or hatred snuff out our dreams. She stood her ground here, and she wanted us to do the same. We honored her wish. Amira turned to her sister, her eyes shining. So what's next? Adeline thought for a moment before answering slowly. I was thinking we could actually farm again. Maybe start small, a modest operation at first. Organic vegetables or a small orchard. People in Maplewood might appreciate a local source of produce. A warm smile crept across Amira's lips. I like that. We could hire local folks, build a real sense of community, show Maplewood that we're not outsiders. We never were. A gentle breeze swept across the field, rustling the tall grass and carrying the sweet scent of earth, a promise of new beginnings. As dusk deepened, the sisters watched the sky shift from orange to pink, eventually fading into deep indigo. For a moment, they stood in silent reflection, allowing themselves to relax after weeks of relentless struggle. In the quiet, memories washed over them. The dusty roads of foreign deployments, the cramped barracks at Fort Benning, the exhaustion of training and the pride of graduation. Each memory was a thread woven into their tapestry of resilience. They weren't just two black sisters from Maplewood anymore. They were Army veterans, farmland owners, and the ones who had toppled a corrupt judge. Yet, beneath all those titles, they were still simply Adeline and Amira Thompson, continuing a family legacy on the land they loved. Over the next year, Maplewood underwent subtle but significant changes. With Harding gone, the judicial system saw a long overdue reform. New judges were appointed, the local committee re-examined their codes, and more townspeople felt emboldened to stand up for their rights. The farmland remained safely under the sisters' care, officially recognized under the Pennsylvania Farmland Preservation Program. Mentioning their time at Fort Benning in interviews reinforced the message that these sisters were not to be trifled with. Adeline and Amira pushed forward with their farming plans, restoring the once neglected fields. They planted seasonal crops, set up a small booth at Maplewood's weekly farmers market, and quickly gained a reputation for quality produce and their unwavering commitment to the community. Where once they had faced suspicion or outright hostility, they were now greeted with appreciation and respect. The local diner started featuring Thompson greens in its specials, a small but symbolic nod to the sisters' success. Meanwhile, Judge Harding faced the full brunt of karmic retribution. Stripped of his position, embroiled in legal battles, and shunned by the community, he spent his days fighting to salvage what remained of his reputation. Few had any sympathy for him. His downfall was widely seen as a rightful consequence of years of bigoted rulings and abuse of power. Perhaps the greatest lesson to emerge from this saga was that, while prejudice and corruption can seem invincible, they crumble under the steady pressure of truth, courage, and unity. Adeline and Amira's refusal to be bullied set an example far beyond Maplewood, showing that even in the face of entrenched injustice, determined individuals can prevail. On the farmland, an early morning fog drifted across the fields where rows of newly planted crops began to sprout. The land once threatened now flourished under their care, a testament to resilience, perseverance, and the unshakable bond between the sisters. The sprouted plants glistened with dew as Adeline walked down an earthen path, checking each row and inhaling the sweet scent of moist soil. Amira, just a short distance away, adjusted a drip irrigation line. They worked with an easy rhythm, their hands busy but their minds at peace. Every so often, they paused to share a joke or a memory, the farmland alive with the hum of insects, the songs of birds, and the quiet satisfaction of a life they had reclaimed through grit and love. Eventually, the sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist. Adeline stood and stretched, gazing at the horizon with a hopeful grin. Amira joined her, wiping sweat from her brow. "You think of what I'm thinking?" Amira asked, her eyes sparkling. Adeline nodded. "Yeah, we finally did it." In that moment, a gentle breeze swept across the farmland, carrying with the echoes of their grandmother's unwavering faith. Yes, they had done it. They stood for justice, preserved their inheritance, and shone a light on Maplewood's darkest corner. Their army training had taught them to fight tirelessly for what was right, while their grandmother's legacy had shown them that land could be both a home and a promise. Their victory confirmed that together they could overcome anything, even racist judges. From that day forward, Maplewood's farmland was more than just fields and crops. It became a symbol of a hard-won battle for dignity and justice. Protected by two sisters, the land reminded everyone that true strength lies in standing up for what's right, no matter the odds.